mania since Errol Flynn, and his swashbuckling style has the general in a headspin. In his rookie season, Marcus Ambrose has wasted no time in creating some hell for Holden. His first ground victory for Ford after only 4 Shell Series appearances.
He's taken outright victory. A big cheer for Marcus Ambrose.
4 weeks ago, the Devil Racer revelled in the hellish heat of Hidden Valley. Consistency was the key on a day when unreliability caused the enforcer to lose his bottle.
Yeah, I was saying the F word and it wasn't Ford.
While Greg Murphy was struck down with a sticking throttle.
It is mechanical murder.
The V8 battle is heating up as we swap Darwin's hot and spicy for something cold and icy. The second running of Canberra's GMC 400. 3 heats and a full reverse grid on a track tighter than the federal budget. Welcome to the National Capital. Round 5 of the 2001 Shell Championship Series, exclusive to your parliamentary home of motorsport. Network 10.
Crunch time in Canberra, day 2 of the GMC 400, and quite heavy fog at this stage, which has so far delayed the warm-up. Not a major problem. We expect the weather to clear very soon, but it is just another calculation for the teams and drivers to make on what is already a very tricky and very important weekend. Lots of points up for grabs here as we welcome you back to pit lane. And it should be a very exciting day. You can't lose the you can't win the championship here today, but you certainly can lose it. There's no doubt about that. And there are plenty of championship contenders, including the 2 men at the top, Jason Bright and Mark Scaife, within only a couple of points of each other. Let's have a closer look at this weather forecast now. We expect things to improve, as I mentioned, to a fine and sunny day, but still very cool. It's extremely cool at the moment because the sun hasn't appeared yet, of course, but that's the expected top temperature, and it should be very pleasant for the drivers. They had an in-car temperature of 54 degrees at Hidden Valley by comparison to only 19 degrees in car for this particular weekend. So very comfortable for the drivers really, but there are a lot of other things they have to worry about. Barry Sheen, welcome back to you. And one of the things they have to worry about today is the reverse grid race, among others.
Well, it's great. It's great for us, people at home watching, because you get guys like, say, Radicic coming through from the back. Unfortunately, he's not right at the back, but it's really good because it throws the whole thing wide open. Stephen Richards, because of his bad position yesterday, is on one of the, I think, the front row of the grid, so you'd have to put your money on Stephen to win. But it's such a difficult place to pass around here. I mean, if you get somebody, if they sit sort of slightly in the middle of the road, there's no way past. It was a great race yesterday, and today I think the reverse grid, although some people don't agree with it, I think it's fantastic, you know, great spectacle.
You wouldn't call it chaotic yesterday, but as with any street circuit, there was a little bit of carnage. Let's have a look at some of the highlights, and there were some marvellous performances as well. But a great start initially because the drivers were a little bit concerned about that first chicane where Russell Ingall actually cut the corner last year. They blocked that route off this year, but they made it pretty safely.
It was great, really, but the first corner, when you think about it, there was no carnage at all. This is the beginning of the third lap when the pit window opened. Everybody thought it might be a good idea to come in, but as you can see, it was like Piccadilly Circus on Saturday morning. There was so much traffic. You see Scaife just coming out there in front of Ambrose, so HRT did a really good pit stop. But the Gibson lot really made a good job because they got Craig out just behind Stephen Johnson. Marcus Ambrose had a gearbox break and it completely destroyed his weekend. This is Stephen Richards' car, so that's why Stephen would be on the back. This was 2 Kmart cars, and it was, you know, basically it's very, very hard around here because it's very narrow. But Stephen Johnson, I mean, he creamed them yesterday. He made a fantastic job.
Great defensive driving towards the end there, beating Lowndes, who had made a great run after that pit stop, of course, that Barry mentioned. Other big winners from yesterday, well, Radicic, of course, was up the top of the timesheets on Friday, had that horrible top 15 shootout, which shoved him back to 15th, but he drove through the field to 6th, so that was excellent. Jason Bargwanna, 20th to 9th, one of the drives of the day there, and a generally improved performance from Gary Rogers Motorsport, which was pleasing to see. By contrast, Marcus Ambrose, well, that was a very difficult day for him because he was running very, very strongly until the gearbox just failed on him. So today he will start at the back of the grid for the reverse grid race and will again for race 3. So it's going to be a hard charge for him. Looking more closely at today's events, starting with the second of our 3 races this weekend. We've had points already for the top 15 shootout in race 1. More points on offer in race 2, over 25 laps. Race 3 is the big one, though. They have to position themselves well for that double points race. That'll be one of the keys to the day, as will, of course, the pit lane tactics. And Neil Crompton, how do you think that the new regulations that we've seen this weekend have affected the racing so far?
Just 2 of the rounds in this year's championship series don't involve a compulsory pit stop, and that's brought new pressures and new dangers to the pit lane. These cars are very big. When 32 of them all arrive at once, we've already seen some times this year where there's been a lot of crisscrossing and some near misses. It can be dangerous for the crews. Problem is, for the drivers, they've been focused on the dashboard in the 60Ks, and they've not been able to look out through the screen to pay attention to the traffic. So this weekend, for the first time, an electronic speed limiter has been introduced. This little red button up here is activated. Now, the pit lane speed limit's been reduced by 20 kilometres an hour to now just 40 Ks. Yesterday, it was very successfully implemented. The drivers didn't infringe, and as a result, the pit lane was a whole lot safer.
Another boost to the safety in pit lane has been the reduction in the number of steel gantries holding these rubber air hoses for the wheel guns. In yesterday's race 1, we saw that the pit lane was much less congested and we didn't really see any drama. Now, an important part in the safety issue here in the V8 Supercar race is the man they call the pit controller, or the car controller. He's the guy who stands at the front of the car during the stop, and he has to make sure that he does not release that car back into pit lane if there's a danger of a collision with another car coming up toward the pit. Now, yesterday we saw a classic example of that during race 1. Stephen Johnson led a whole gaggle of cars off for their compulsory pit stop, and that included Mark Scape. Now, after Johnson had completed his stop and he was trundling down pit lane, Scape was just completing the end of his stop. And as Scape was ready to rejoin the track, if it hadn't have been for the pit controller, he probably would have charged right out into pit lane. But you can see the pit controller just had to hold him just for a fraction of a second to allow Johnson to get through. Scape got second in the queue, but he lost the lead spot. That's an important thing to remember in this race. Those split-second decisions can make the difference between winning and losing at the GMC 400.
Well, they're on the track now for the warm-up, but pretty soon they'll be racing the second of 3 this weekend. We'll be back after the break with more from this event. Even more recent than the GMC 400 itself is the National Museum in Canberra. You can actually go cross-country on this wide brown land, a lot easier than anybody else. It's a marvellous visual experience, but also very educational as well. And a lot of the fans and a lot of the drivers and teams have had a chance when they can to check in and check out the National Museum this weekend. Why don't we check out the championship points right now in the Shell Championship Series, and how close is that between Bright and Scape, the teammates? Russell Ingall still knocking on the door. Likewise, after that marvellous haul of 108, the maximum possible so far this weekend, Stephen Johnson in 4th place ahead of Greg Murphy. But you can see the differential there is not very much at all as we go down through the top 20. Paul Morris having a pretty good weekend so far. It's nice to see him turning the season around here in Canberra, despite the conditions, of course, which everybody has to put up with, not only the drivers and the crew outside, but inside the garages as well, as Greg Rust explains.
Yesterday morning, the John Faulkner Racing Commodore was involved in a massive shunt that all but destroyed the front end of his Commodore and several panels at the rear as well. But the miracle workers here in the Smash Repair team at the circuit have done exactly that, and the Thermo King Commodore is ready to race today. John Faulkner, did you ever think that was possible?
I must admit, I'm truly amazed. The car, well, unfortunately, we missed the warm-up this morning, but the deal was their guys would work all night and our guys would work alongside them. We didn't think it was possible. The car was back to an absolute bare shell, so the drama will be starting from the back of the grid. We'll try and make the first race, which in turn, if we can finish that strong, we'll make the second. But it's going to be a pretty strong effort from the back of the grid.
I know you're feeling a bit stiff and sore today, mate. Best of luck.
Thank you.
We talk about how punishing these street circuits are on machinery, but how can we show you? No, thank you. This is probably one of the best demonstrations you'll find. This is Marcus Ambrose's gearbox input shaft. Now, yesterday, this is where it sheared straight through. Now, it's particularly so tough around here because the drivers pull first gear 5 times. It's extraordinary torque loadings and thus very punishing. Now, last night, as a result of Marcus's little problem, many teams were looking quite closely at their gearboxes, and the question does beg, with 2 races today and the second one double length, will machinery hold up? Will anyone else fall by the wayside in a similar fashion?
Noticeably in the nation's capital in the last couple of hours, but this isn't the nation's capital. It's actually Paul Wheel and David Bernard goofing off in what was a mock acclimatisation plan for the GMC 400. But of course, just a bit of fun in the name of publicity, and that's about the quickest David's gone this weekend. It's been a tough weekend for him, but very slippery on the ice. We hope there won't be any dramas out here in this race where we're going to see a reverse grid and lots of action. Coincidentally, there's David Bernard just crossing your screen at the moment, going through the first chicane. We're ready to roll.
He speaks very highly of you, Bill.
That was a delightful music track. Available nowhere, hopefully. The Shell Helix grid, and this is how they'll line up for race 2. It's reverse grid, remember, so Steve Reed will start from pole position alongside him. Last year's round winner, Stephen Richards, Dougal McDougall 3rd, Paul Romano, Rodney Forbes in 5th, Tyler Mecklem 6th, Stephen Ellery 7th, Jason Richards from New Zealand is 8th.
Yeah, the grid's really mixed up this morning. If you look down the right-hand side of the Shell Helix grid, you'll see those yellow boxes. That shows where they qualified before the start of racing, so you get an idea of how they've moved up and down through the field throughout the weekend.
Championship leader Jason Bright is 17th, John Bow, Jason Barguana, Russell Ingall, Paul Morris, a good run yesterday. Paul Radishu stormed through the field, he'll be 22nd, Glenn Seaton, Garth Panda.
Now keep in mind these positions toward the back are as a result of the full reverse grid. These are the guys who did very well yesterday. Mark Scaife, Craig Lowndes, Stephen Johnson, the race winner. He'll start out at 27, and then behind them all the guys who did not finish, including Marcus Ambrose with his broken gearbox, Todd Kelly, Cameron McLean was in trouble, Tony Longhurst, and John Faulkner as a result of a big crash even before race 1 started.
There will be a compulsory pit stop, same as yesterday, race 1. It'll be for tyres only, and then later today in our broadcast we'll bring you race 3 with 2 compulsory stops, 1 for tyres, another for fuel. 25 laps the journey for this one, 50 later today. Interesting, the air temperature at the moment just 7 degrees, noticeably cooler than we've had all week. The track temperature is actually 10 degrees. And yesterday in racing conditions, remember in Darwin we had temperatures in the 50s, well, cabin temperatures yesterday around 19 degrees.
Check out the Ford race analysis on the Canberra Street Circuit. 25 laps the distance, 100 kilometres, 32 starters. The compulsory pit stop is between laps 3 and 18. That's when the leader has completed 3 laps, the window's open. And Stephen Richards, of course, last year's winner, he starts off the front row here.
Remember, we spoke with John Faulkner before, and the Smash repair team did an enormous job overnight to try and repair that car. Well, they haven't quite made it. He's not going to make this second race, but he will be ready, hopefully, for the 3rd race a little later today.
Tell you what, those guys have done a sensational job. They really do need a pat on the back, the Smash repair team. There were 12 apprentices who worked 24 hours solid. That's the equivalent of about 4 weeks of man-hour time just trying to get that car ready. Fabulous performance by those guys.
Do you know, the sad part about it is I was in there about 5 minutes ago. All they needed to do was put the fuel tank in it. They probably needed about another 5 minutes, and fantastic job those TAFE guys have done. I mean, they're all apprentices, and you know, if you're going to bring your car, it's good to have them around.
Now, it's going to be interesting to see here, Neil. We saw a brilliant bit of tactics by the Gibson Motorsport team yesterday, leaving Lowndes out there for a couple of laps on clear track, allowed him to jump from 7th up to 2nd. I wonder if anyone's learnt any lessons overnight.
But I think the thing about that is, though, Mark, it could have gone horribly wrong. If the safety car had come out, he'd have been...
Well, the thing is, if you're going to be conservative and you don't want to take the risk with the safety car, you can end up getting stuck in that pack that all pits together and go out on the track together. If you're prepared to take a few risks, quite often it can pay off.
Steve Reed. Normally we'd run through the in-car cameras for you at this point, but because of some of the lingering fog, we're not going to be able to bring you some shots until we can send our chopper up and our pilot can see where he's going.
It does help.
It's going to be a fascinating contest. This Stephen Richards, very well placed though to be off the front row of the grid.
On the warm-up lap, word through on the radio that Stephen Johnson's cycling some heat into those front tyres. You've got 60 degrees in the front, 48 degrees in the rear, so he's worked his brakes very hard on the warm-up lap. Temperature in the tyres will be the critical thing for the first lap and a half of this race. Look for locked brakes and mistakes. The green flag all clear. We are set for a start.
racing. Richards crawls sideways. Reed up the inside. McDougall into third. A huge pack, an angry pack at the back. All trying to make position. Richards on the outside. Reed goes through to the lead. Forbes side by side.
Well, look at this. Absolute bumper to bumper, door handle to door handle stuff as they try and shuffle 32 cars through that incredibly tight turn one. Battle here, McDougall muscling through on the inside of Stephen Richards. As the fields try to sort themselves out through the GMC flip-flop, it's Reed, McDougall, Richards, Romano's in there too.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Be totally amazing with the guys coming through from the back on cold tyres if they get through the first lap without something going wrong.
I think we're going to see a few tricks in strategy here once that pit window opens at the end of lap 3.
And if you were at the back of the pack and you're obviously going to be very fumbled up for lap speed, the call here would be to get in early and then go back out onto an empty track so that you're making good lap speed. And when all these front runners eventually peel off, the world will open up in front of you. There's Lowndes, Harry, Stephen Johnson yesterday in a tremendous battle. Mark Larkham there had a problem on Friday with an accident. Oh, look at this. Reed, McDougall and Stephen Richards, a three-way battle heading down State Circle for the first time.
Steve was struggling for grip on that opening lap. Just got a little bit out of shape coming through the GMC flip-flop. Car's getting into the groove now. He's up there in second behind Steve Reed in the Lansvale car.
I wasn't sure. I think I saw something hanging off the back of Seaton's car. The back of the lower sponsor and the lower spoiler at the back of it.
Probably going to be a bit of body damage on these cars in this opening lap as the fast guys try to get their way through the slower ones. Look how close it is here. Cars bouncing off the curbs, nose to tail. Everyone looking for an advantage on this hectic opening lap.
McConville was sweating all over the back. Oh, look at this, of Rodney Forbes. And there's a glimpse there also of Jason Richards. A quick plug for those of you watching our telecast in New Zealand. Tickets go on sale tomorrow. Someone's got a problem up against the wall. Just finish that comment quickly. Tickets go on sale for Pukekohe. We're going to New Zealand for the first time. The Championship Series goes offshore. If you're going to go to that event, and it's going to be huge, grab some tickets. They are on sale at Ticketek New Zealand from tomorrow.
So the order at the moment: Steve Reed, Stephen Richards, McDougall, Paul Romano, Stephen Ellery in 5th, Tyler Mecklem in 6th. He would be used to that. Rodney Forbes, Mark Larkham, Jason Richards and Paul Wheel rounds out the top 10.
This is encouraging for Richards and the Kiwi team because they've had a tough start to the championship year and he's in 9th at the moment, well in contention. Steve Reed doing a good job hanging on here. This demonstrates how tough it can be to pass on this circuit.
There's his teammate, I think, Cameron McConville. Saw him dropping out, coming through the forward sweep of problems there. Will be damaged as a result of that first lap shuffle. That's been very costly for Cameron. Into the pits on the opening lap.
Look at that for a lock-up.
Carbon copy of Craig Lowndes there yesterday in the Gibson Motorsport car. Had a huge lock-up during his qualifying lap. Stephen Richards got to watch these tyre temperatures. Great lock-ups on this high cambered circuit. Let's have a look at the Shell Helix replay.
And watch Mark Scaife at the back of the pack there. We'll see what happens here. Apparently there's a bit of squeezing going on. One of the Kmart cars rubs the wall. And look at Scaife getting stuck into the back of Glenn Seaton as they go down towards turn 1. It's biff and barge everywhere. They're virtually stopped.
Look at the amount of elbowing and hitting going on there. Look at the damage.
The HRT Commodore's taken a pretty decent whack there as he's gone into the back of Glenn. Notice that one of the Kmart cars gave the left wall a big rub as well. Down here in the pits with Cameron McConville. This is a lengthy stop. He clipped the wall just running onto the pit straight here and he's bent a tyre on. They've switched the engine off. This is not looking good for the Lansvale Smash team.
Yeah, that's not surprising when you look at how close and competitive things were on that opening lap. Fast cars mixed in with slow cars. There was always going to be a bit of body or suspension damage, and unfortunately McConville has paid the price. Look at McDougall here now trying to find a way past Steve Reed. The veteran's done a good job off that opening lap. Very easy to lose your cool with all that pressure.
He was running very defensively over the back of the course, and Richards was obviously pushing hard under brakes and locked them before. Now here's damage to Murphy. And was it Greg that was up against the wall heading down into turn 1? Perhaps it was.
He's getting out of the car.
Oh, wow.
So Ross Crawford there, the team manager, telling Murph to get out. She's over. Major damage, terminal damage in Murph. As you can see, it's not been a good day. So the order at the moment: Stephen Richards, Stephen Reed, McDougall, Paul Romano still in 4th, Stephen Ellery in 5th, Mecklem in 6th. Positions remaining fairly static. Rodney Forbes up inside the top 10 now. Mark Larkham, Jason Richards, Paul Wheel, David Bernard just outside the top 10 in 11th spot.
Look the yellow flag flying. Somebody's gone up. It's Paul Romano. Understand that Greg Murphy's pretty irate and he's wandered back to his transporter. You probably saw a glimpse there of Greg Russ trying to get hold of him, but we'll catch up with Murphy a little bit later on and find out what happened. I think he was the car that got squeezed up on the left-hand side. Maybe Rob Crawford could shed some light for us.
Well, I'm down in the pits here at the moment. It's all stations happening here at Kmart Racing. Rob Crawford, who we're going to have a word with, has just had to duck off because it looks like Todd Kelly might be coming in. Murph is not really prepared to talk to us at the moment. He's damaged the steering quite badly.
Must be pretty bad to upset Murph, mustn't it?
Yeah, I think he was the one that was getting squeezed heavily down there in the first turn. It really is a case here, I think, particularly for a reverse grid race for a rolling start. And it's just so difficult to launch all these cars off the start-finish line and then bring them to a virtual stop at that first corner with guys that have got pace at the back. It's a very difficult thing for everybody to cooperate. There's Kelly coming in.
Larry Perkins out of the race after 2 laps as well. Look at the damage here. Pit window is open, and look at them all coming in. The first opportunity they get. Long line of cars.
Is history repeating itself? They all fumble each other when they go through that process. This is what happened yesterday.
Trouble is you get stuck in that queue, Neil, and you get that concertina effect as well. People further back in the queue are going to get held up a lot more than the cars
stopped
in
for
front.
Kelly, and he stalled it.
His Scape.
No, that was actually Bright.
Is that Bright?
Too.
Yep. So Bright's come in before Scape this time around. Yesterday Scape was first in. So Bright makes his first stop this time around. Gets out of the traffic. Oh, how close was that?
Oh, that was... Oh, Brad Jones wasn't too pleased about that.
Well, we were talking about the importance of the car
look at the front of Ingles thing.
The car controller making sure that he doesn't send his car out to a potential collision situation. Well, how close was that?
Ingle looked like he's hit something up the back or whatever.
See how close and frantic it gets at that pit stop. Everyone knows how critical those stops are. You can even pick up one place, and around this track that can be extremely valuable.
Well, lap 4 of 25, the pit window has been opened. We've seen the first sequence of stops. We've got a jumbled order in this race already. Look at this replay.
Now this is the Jeff Grech is the car controller on that car. He's let it go, and look how
at that close that was.
Well, that required Jones to throw the brakes on, and everybody had to get out of the throttle in order for it to work. 40 k's, remember the speed limit in the pit lane now, and that certainly made things safer.
I was talking to Jeff this morning about that very situation. He said, gee, it's a tough call when you're standing there. You obviously want to get your car out as soon as you can, but it's up to him. It's his responsibility to make sure he doesn't release the car into the path of another one. And you can imagine under the enormous pressures in pit lane, making that judgment call can be pretty tough.
Fastest lap of the race so far, Paul Radisich. Paul was quickest in the morning warm-up. He did a 1:44 flat, which was very quick in cold conditions. Tyler Mecklem with a bit of smoke coming off the front of that thing. He's had a rub somewhere with something. Now the order at the moment is still Steve Reed, McDougall, Larkham, Jason Richards, David Bernard, Jason Barguana, Paul Radisich, quick man on the track, McLean, Scaife and Lowndes in the 10. There's the leader. Remember, there's a race within a race here. The quick guys are at the back. Some have chosen to stop, some haven't. It'll be difficult to know how this whole event will unfold until after everybody's shaken out with their stops. Probably a good half or more of the field have stopped so far. Those that haven't include Lowndes, Scaife, Ambrose, other contenders, Paul Morris. So that's why we saw Paul Romano off. He had the Ultra-Tune car there.
Tuning him.
Giving him a tune-up.
So if you look back in the pack, I think Stephen Richards, he's back in 17th in the overall order now. He's the first of the cars that's made its compulsory stop. Stephen Richards back in 17th, so all the cars in front of him yet to stop. Well, look at this, getting hot and heavy here between Seaton and Brad Jones. Jones up the inside. No one wants to give way. Jones goes up on the curb. They're still side by side and very close to a collision with the concrete wall.
I think that was Seaton that was getting the squeeze there, and that something came off the car, and Glenn's had his ears boxed in that manoeuvre. It's twice in 2 days he's really come off second best. And now Jones being attacked by 34, which is Tander in the Valvoline car.
So it gets so hectic, isn't it, now, when they come out? Everyone just jostling for position. Just after they make that stop and the tyres aren't quite up to temperature, it's a crucial time. If the car's got a little bit more grip than the other one, it's a good time to pounce.
This is a pretty quick stop by the Dick Johnson Racing team, but I can't remember pit lane being as frantic as it has been in this race today. Tyler Mecklem came in before with a flat right front tyre, and Stephen Johnson was tucked right in behind him on the 40k/h speed limit. There was no room between them, and there's lots of cars, let me tell you, with panel damage.
Mark Scaife is in pit lane now. You can just see the damage to the front of the #1 car there.
And twice in 2 days that Scaife has had to get out of the throttle when he's left the pits to make way for other cars.
Boy.
I know that there's some entertainment fors, but there's some sporting against the reverse grid. Lap 6 of 25. We still haven't seen the full shakeout here to see who's on top. Steve Reed, meanwhile, continues to lead this race.
Oh, look at this, Celery and Bernard.
Bernard getting very sideways. Not sure if there was contact between himself and the Super Cheap Autos machine, but he managed to gather it up.
That was up at turn 3, just at the back of Old Parliament House. Here's Bernard in behind Paul Radisich, who's just freshly completed that stop. He's on cold tyres.
Stephen Richards slowly moving his way up the order. He is the first of the cars that's made its compulsory stop. He's in 13th now. The field's starting to come back to him. Still a number of cars in front of him that need to make their compulsory stops. Plenty of contact here. David Bernard pushing hard, trying to find a way past Paul Radisich. So we've just got a bit of a jumble here the next few laps. This field sort themselves out, and these compulsory pit stops are out of the way.
An interesting race too on our hands at the moment. We're 7 laps in with Reed leading from McDougall, then Larkham, Kiwi Jason Richards, Craig Lowndes up to 5th from Ambrose, the charging man from yesterday, then Romano and Barguano.
It'll be interesting to watch the overlap as these fast cars come through. More from the GMC 400 on the other side of this.
Steve Reed in the pits, of course, race leader for some time and pole sitter here in the reverse grid race at the GMC 400. Let's see if he can regain some valuable track position. There's some interesting tactics going on out there with Lowndes and Ambrose on the charge rapidly through the order. Can they sustain those positions when they come into the pits themselves? Now, on the web, you can follow the fortunes of your heroes on v8supercar.com.au. Just a reminder, as these two cars are side by side there, eventually Dougal McDougall giving way to Steve Reed there in pit lane. And also the chat room today, rpmlive.tv is the location. 6 to 7 is your opportunity, so right after sports tonight, jump onto the web and get involved yourself. Back with the action.
Good decision by McDougall to get out of the throttle there. You're not permitted to drive down the working lane side by side with another car. If he pushed on with that, I'm sure that he would have incurred the wrath of the stewards. So this man was our race leader, Steve Reed. Meanwhile, the battle continues between Lowndes and Ambrose. They're stationed 4th and 5th on the road at the moment and yet to take their compulsory stop.
This is a fascinating situation. We've just been looking at the timing monitor here. Lowndes is about 28 seconds in front of Stephen Richards. Stephen Richards is the first man to have made the compulsory stops. So this is going to be interesting if Lowndes can get in and out of the pits very quickly. He may well be able to get out pretty much at the time Stepven Richards comes past.
Oh,
watch
Dougal
that.
McDougall.
Dougal McDougall. Now, is this going to be a safety car? If it is,
almost certainly.
This is going to be a major problem for.
Oh, look at this,
David Bernard. Another car caught up in some drama here. So if this is, and then Lowndes has got in before the safety car came out. So that was the critical thing. Everyone was waiting. If you're going to take a risk, it may have all come undone.
Well, can confirm that for you. The safety car board was not shown before Craig Lowndes entered pit lane. Had a word to Alan Heatley as well. They always plan to bring Craig in at a time when he has a good space out on the track to make some ground.
Gee, this is going to be the fascinating thing. If we watch the wide shot at the end of pit lane here, we might get a shot of where Stephen Richards is relative to Craig Lowndes.
No, he's gone through.
No, he's already
gone through.
Okay.
But Lowndes is certainly going to make a great big net gain on the other contenders. Remember that Stephen Richards started with enormous track position advantages because of starting on the front row relative to all the guys that did well yesterday.
Trying to see where he rejoined the track relative.
He's come in behind Larkham, so he's in 6th on the road at the moment. No, 5th.
Still Jason Richards and Marcus Ambrose to make their compulsory stops.
And if he's managed to squeeze that stop in before a potential safety car, then that will also give him another gain.
So he should be 3rd, I think, by our calculations. By the time those other two guys make their compulsory stops.
Dougal McDougall wallops the wall down at Holden Corner. turns 8 and 9. And it's a lot of damage to the front left. Momentary flame there. Obviously a line's come off somewhere, fuel or oil. And he may well have only just come out of the pit lane on cold tyres and either has copped a bump from somebody or has had some other problem. Meanwhile, look at this battle here. Oh, a huge lock-up. Straight ahead. He's lost track position there in a huge way.
And it's ended up with a tyre like a 50-cent piece.
He's had trouble at that part of the track. Saw him really lock it up big time in the top 15 shootout yesterday. And now he's done it again on the... Oh, look, he's locking a number of points around the circuit.
Well, cold tyre, that's what it is. See, the brakes are hot. His rhythm is established in his mind, but the tyres are not up to the job on that opening lap.
Well, provided he hasn't lost a position to one of the cars that have already made a compulsory stop, he should be third in the order by the time Ambrose and Jason Richards make their stops, because it'll be Stephen Richards, Mark Larkham, Craig Lowndes in third. That's if he hasn't lost another position. We're just confirming that for you.
He's certainly lost position to Bow and to one of the Valvoline cars.
You look at that car of Bernard's, there's been a real bit of fighting going on there. I wonder if it was with Radicic, because they were pretty close together, weren't they?
Well, we'll try and find out. We've got Grant and Greg in pit lane, and we'll get the boys on the job.
Okay, so we've got Marcus Ambrose and Jason Richards 1 and 2 on the track, but they're still to make their compulsory stops. So the effective race order is Stephen Richards first, Mark Larkham second, Jason Bargwana third, Radicic fourth, John Bow fifth, and Craig Lowndes sixth. That's what it'll be after those front two make their stops.
And that manoeuvre that we saw Craig Lowndes make probably dropped him a good 3 spots there. I think he lost position to Bargwana, Radicic and Bow. So
they all snuck through when he went off.
And had that not been the case, he'd be what, third? There it is, another lock up. Maybe have a little bit too much front brake on the car at the moment.
Yeah, he's really struggling.
Well, I'm pretty disappointed. David Bernard down here in pit lane. What's happened? Lots of damage to the Caltex car.
Yeah, I haven't had a good look at it. She's pretty much toast. Dougal McDougall had a big one in front of me, and I had nowhere to go. Just purely got caught up in someone else's accident.
Hard luck, mate.
It's a shame because the Haviland 4 was running really well. We were in a strong position there and puts us out for the weekend now, probably.
And a locked rear brake for John Bow allows Craig Lowndes to make up another spot.
And someone who's hanging out the track for a long time is Marcus Ambrose. He's just come into the pits now. He was 38 seconds in front of Mark Larkham by our calculations. So if he gets out of the pit very quickly, he may well be in second place. There he comes. So Ambrose now rejoining the race as he hits that speed limiter, crawling up the road at 40 kilometres an hour. Stephen Richards has just passed our commentary box at the end of pit lane. Just watch the other positions come through. Mark Larkham has come through.
Gee, there's some battle-scarred cars out there. Every second car that goes by has got a graunch or a scrape or a bit hanging off it.
Now, by our calculations, Ambrose rejoined in third place. He didn't get out in front of Larkham, so he's third in this order now. So that's a great fight back from the rear of the grid after not finishing the race yesterday.
Quick time from Lowndes, 44.3, did a 44.7 yesterday. So again, he's proving the pace of the car. There's Ambrose. So he's gone out and hung on to track position. We saw McDougall go off before. And now Larkham's gone down there.
Okay, so he picks up another spot. So Ambrose has just capitalised on that problem with Larkham.
Our cameraman must have known something. We were ready for him to arrive.
So the Pertec Ford picks up another spot. This has been a brilliant drive by Ambrose and good operation by the Stone Brothers Ford team to get him up into this strong position.
Their strategy could have been affected even more by David Bernard's car. When David came into pit lane, they were not expecting him. Obviously, they told Marcus to stay out for an additional lap because under the revised rules, 2-car teams can only work on 1 car at a time.
Yeah, I spoke to Marcus last night and he said, well, that's the only thing we've got on our plate. We have to take a risk. If we're going to come running from the back of the grid, we've got to try and push that safety car envelope and just hope the one doesn't come out. We're going to stay out on the track as long as we can while he's done it, and it's paid big dividends.
Do you know, I was thinking that with this reverse grid situation and with the narrowness of the circuit, I reckon there's a lot to be said for a rolling start with in order, you know, just sort of single file start, because at least that way it deletes any chance of carnage at the first corner on the first lap, and then they can sort themselves out, can't they?
It's a pre-mixed accident when you put the fast guys at the back, and you know, they're all anxious to make position, and there's a lot of good reasons for that, and then they just cannon into the back of people, particularly down here.
Problem is for Marcus Ambrose, of course, he's going to get the points earned from a good position in this race, but for the 50 lapper, he once again goes to the back of the field as a result of starting this race as it did not finish in race 1, they punish you for the rest of the weekend. So he's got to do it all again in the 50 lap of this afternoon.
So I think we can finally give you now a shaken out order as the debris flag is shown down there at turn 8. It is Stephen Richards leading from Marcus Ambrose, Jason Bargwanna, you can see them there on screen, Radisish Lowndes in 5th, Bow, Paul Wheel, Mark Larkham after his small mistake. Steve Reed still amongst it in 9th, and Richards makes a blue, gathers it up. And then Rodney Forbes is in 10th. Further back, contenders Scaife and Bright are 11th and 12th. Ingle is 13th, Tander 14th, then Jason Richards, McLean, Stephen Johnson is 17th, Todd Kelly, Glenn Seaton, Tony Longhurst, Brad Jones.
Things have certainly turned around for the Blue Oval this weekend. I'm just looking at that top 8. I think Bargwanna's the only Holden in that top 8. They're all forwards.
On board with Mark Scaife, giving Rodney Forbes a wake-up call there. So, and another whack.
Wow.
So Forbes had to get on the brake because somebody else in front of him had a moment, and there was already damage to the front of the HRT Commodore after turn 1, so that will further complicate issues at the front of the car.
HRT didn't do well out of those stops. Mark Scaife's back in 11th, Jason Bright in 12th. So they certainly got caught up in a few of those incidents.
I just look at Ambrose, he's 11, so he was 13 seconds behind Richards.
And we hear on the radio that Mark Scaife's coming in, he's got a problem with the left front tyre. This might be him now.
Can you keep driving or not? No way.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, look at the damage.
Well, sending the information via rail there. The radio's not particularly strong around here with a number of overhead bridges and trees. He's coming to the pit lane. So costly damage to the front of Scaife's car. We saw it on the replay. He got into the back of Rodney Forbes' car, and Rodney propped for some other reason with somebody else in front of him.
And this is really going to...
First grid, but...
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We'll come back and have a chat to you later on.
Only trouble is, this is really going to hurt his starting position for the 50 lap of this afternoon. Keep in mind, it's based on an aggregate of your results from race 1 and race 2. He gets a lousy finishing position here. It's really going to hurt his starting position for the final.
He's going to be really lucky if he hasn't done the rad there.
Yeah,
look at this damage.
Serious amount of damage.
You may have heard Mark Scaife and how angry he is, fired up about this reverse grid situation. He says he doesn't mind them, but when you get into this concertina effect where running in the back of the other people is inevitable, well, then he just doesn't like that sort of situation. He is so fired up in the car, he keeps slamming his hand on the steering wheel. What they're going to do about the car, they have to make a decision very shortly whether he has to go back out, but it's not looking good for Mark Scaife right now.
Boy, it doesn't even look like they can get the bonnet undone.
Keep in mind, if he is declared a non-finisher in this race, he automatically has to start from the back of the grid. There'll be a good company back there with Marcus Ambrose.
They can't get a bonnet pin open there at the moment to even assess what situation they have with the radiator and perhaps oil coolers, brake ducting. A lot of gear around the front of the car there, so a lot of damage. Here's another replay.
Cameron
look at this, Cameron McLean right in front.
Oh, he had a big failure of that front right corner. It's put him into the concrete wall at the GMC flip-flop.
Am I allowed to make a political comment?
Feel free.
Reverse grid races are rubbish.
Why don't you just say what you think?
They're rubbish. You might as well just create an accident with those rules. Here we go. The race score tells the story. We'll come back to that later. Stephen Richards is leading. Marcus Ambrose, Jason Bargwanna, Paul Radisish, Craig Lowndes, John Bow, Paul Wheel and Mark Larkham.
Rounding out the top 10, Rodney Forbes and Jason Bright, Garth Tander, Russell Ingle, Jason Richards in there too. More after this.
We're back with the GMC 400, and just a reminder, as race 2 continues, Sports Tonight follows this telecast. Matthew White bringing you all the highlights and action from not only this event but all the big events in the sporting world. And also a reminder too, Barbagallo is the next destination, racing over 2 days. If you're booking your tickets or planning your trip right now, and check your telecast time there as well, June 24. Returning to a sprint format, of course, for Barbagallo. But at the moment, on track, things are slowing down. I understand the safety car is coming out. So we're going to pause. Of course, an even bigger problem for HRT is Mark Scaife. The bonnet's still up in pit lane as I speak, and the car's slowing down out on the circuit. So lots of drama here in this second race. And we know Neil Crompton's thoughts about all this, but there certainly hasn't been a dull moment, gentlemen.
No, you're right about that, Bill. the safety car has gone out onto the circuit. And just to qualify those remarks, I just have a problem with going into a race knowing that you're going to unfold so much damage, and the decisions to do these sorts of things are often taken by people who don't have to do the work on the cars.
Or pay the bills.
Or pay the bills.
Ambrose is flying. He's by far the quickest, almost a second quicker than anybody else. He cut that down from 14 seconds to 8. Now, with a safety car, he's going to be right behind him.
Right there. There he is.
There he is.
Right behind our race leader, Stephen Richards. Marcus Ambrose on the Stone Brothers Racing team. Done a terrific job to get him from last on the grid up to second. Keep in mind the rules here for the GMC 400. If you started the reverse grid race from the back of the grid as it did not finish you, you start again from the back with a 50-lapper.
Just prior to that safety car coming out, Jim Stone got on the radio to Marcus and said, just take it easy. They knew he was setting those incredibly quick lap times, and they thought in the latter stages of this race, they don't want anything to go wrong, just bring it home.
And we hear from the pitch that Craig Lowndes is asking the Gibson Motorsport team, why is the safety car on the track? He can't see an accident or a reason for the car to be out.
Answers on a postcard.
So it's interesting. I haven't sat down to work out what's called the nominal point score, but the way that I would read yesterday's result plus the on-screen situation that we're looking at the moment with the order, I'd say that Lowndes is a chance to start on the front row. In fact, I think he'd be pole for race 3. I was just running through that in my mind. So.
And I think Radicic, by our sums here with our statistician Nigel Greenway, it'll be Lowndes off pole, Radicic off second, so it's an all-forward front row. Bargwanna off the inside of row 2, he'll be third, and Johnson will start off 4th. And Tander will start off 5th, so it's amazing turnaround for the Gary Rogers Motorsport team. He scored no points here last year, and now he's actually doing much better.
Why is the safety car out?
We're just trying to hear from race control why the safety car's on the circuit. Everyone seems to be in a bit of confusion. There doesn't seem to be anything out there obviously dangerous, which has required this to be called out.
Oh, there we go.
Apart from a tilt truck.
Oh, the tilt truck, yeah. There we are.
That's Cameron McLean. Is that Cameron McLean's going up against the tyres there?
Yeah, so this is down in the area of turns 8 and 9. And obviously the race director doesn't want cars at racing speed out there when you've got trucks down in the runoff areas and so forth. So that answers the question.
So the race drivers may be confused as to why the safety car's out there, but there it is. Tilt trucks on the circuit, try and clear up a couple of wrecks before we continue with the conclusion of this race 2.
So one guy that had a brilliant day yesterday, who's not figuring in the numbers at the moment, is this fella's teammate, Stephen Johnson, who's down in 14th. So he's had a shocker. We might see if we can get a handle on what's happened there as to whether they had a congested and poor pit stop or a slow in or out lap or just a poor strategy for some reason. But Stephen, after winning yesterday's race, is a long way down in the order in this second encounter. Here's the order for you at the moment. And it's Richards, Ambrose, Bargwanna, Radicic, then Lowndes, Bow, Wheel and Larkham, and there was some scrambling there with Lowndes, Bow and Larkham. We saw them all make mistakes and go off. Then it's Forbes, championship leader Bright, who's got a bit of pressure off him now because his teammate that was knocking on the door for points is in the pit lane. Further back down through the order for you. There's a couple of unanswered mysteries in this field there at the moment, but I mean, the amount of damage, the amount of carnage. I mean, I know people who'll contest my point here will say, well, the guys just should drive slower or take more care, but it just doesn't work like that. This is a street circuit. Street circuits, by definition, are difficult to pass on, and they don't allow for mistakes. If you want to run a reverse grid race, you run them somewhere where you've got open plains, but do you need reverse grid races? Why not give them honking horns and big red noses? You know, I mean, it's just...
I can see you're a real fan of this, Neil.
Honestly, motor racing's about the fastest people being at the front and the slowest people being at the back. Amen.
Amen.
You know, they don't mess with cricket, they don't mess with tennis.
Written and spoken by Neil Crompton for Channel 10 commentary team.
It's an election year, isn't it? So you're allowed to say that. So we're in the right environment for that sort of political comment.
No, that's fair enough.
That's just my view.
You're a current driver. Well, you're a current driver. You were out here in this reverse grid situation last year, so you know firsthand what it's like.
And I go overseas on Monday, so I can flee the emails and the phone calls afterwards.
Can I make a comment on the open line?
Yeah,
Yeah, go
Yes,
call it hard.
what's your name? Where are you calling from? The Ford Tickford Racing Team. Some fingers crossed down here at the moment and hoping that Stevie can bring it home. And I can tell you an update from the Ambrose pit as well. They're saying to him, if you're going to have a go at Stephen in the latter stages of this one, just make it clean. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those situations where you just cannot afford to do anything too crazy. There's big points on the line here, and keep in mind it's the double points race, the 50 lapper this afternoon. Neil, it's almost like these two 25 lappers yesterday afternoon and this morning are a continuation of qualifying.
That's what it is.
You've got to stay on top of the bubble until you get to the point where you're really going to earn some big numbers.
Yeah, I think Mark Schaefer's mentioned that before, and that's the way that it has to be treated. There's the one flying lap in the shootout, and then there's sort of another 50 laps broken into 225, which is an extension of qualifying. It buys you a ticket into the final, if you like, where the big points are on offer. That man that you saw in the FTR pit with the jacket on and hands in the pocket is managing director of Tickford, David Flint. The company's just been bought out by ProDrive in the UK, so a change in the management structure there.
Lights are off on the safety car, so we're going back to full green flag racing conditions. Keep in mind the laps prior to this safety car coming out, Marcus Ambrose broke the lap record in the Pertec Ford, so he's really been flying. And look at the push and shove here as we get back to green. Stephen Richards defending on the inside. Marcus Ambrose ducks to the outside. Look at them hard under brakes into turn one. We always get a bit of drama here.
Oh, there you go.
Saw Lowndes on the outside of, I think it might have been Radisish there, but
Yeah, looked like it.
Thundering down toward the GMC flip-flop, back at full speed. Marcus Ambrose trying to find a way around Stephen Richards, but Richards is wise to the push.
Lowndes lost a place to Bow in all that because Bow's got in front of him. Look further down this order. There's the Valvoline car, Shell car, Cat car, and then Lowndes. So he's actually dropped a spot in that restart.
Down through Holton Turn, swinging on to Kings Avenue. Field push their way up towards State Circle. Hard on the brakes. Stephen Richards looking well in command here, but Marcus Ambrose filling the mirrors of the FTR Ford. Castrol holding in behind them. They sweep under Parliament House, 240 kilometres an hour on the approach to turn 11. That's hard on the brakes. You've seen lots of cars locking their brakes here. Mark Scape is still stuck in pit lane. The Holden Racing team are going to try and get this car to finish. If they can just get it to finish, it's going to keep him off the back row of the grid. He's still going to be starting a long way back, guys, you'd imagine, and by the time they've done the points.
That's amazing. He hasn't broken the rad.
So hard on the brakes at the end of Flynn Place into turn 13. Stephen Richards, look at Paul Morris heading on the inside of Perkins.
Perkins.
And he's turned Perkins around.
Oh, dear.
So Larry was one of the lap cars there. Got caught up in the big push. Now he's got to let the field go through. He's not having a good weekend, Larry.
See just a small section of the big crowd that's gathered here today. The sun's now coming out. It's going to be a fabulous day's racing, and there's a lot of interest in Canberra for the event. Tremendous sightseeing around here and some great shots that we've seen. And there's Scape rejoining the pack. Many laps down now, and with a heavily disabled car, but they're doing everything they can to make sure that they can get on that grid for race 3 and not be at the back.
Keep in mind, Paul Morris is a lap car in this battle as well.
Scape's pulled up to let all the traffic go by. It's probably more a courtesy than a technical problem. There's Lowndes applying pressure to the back of Bow. He lost the spot in the restart. What a race.
Amazing, up and down. Number of position changes as a result of this reverse grid. But Paul Morris is a lap car here. So the rest of the cars behind him are battling for position. Stephen Richards and Marcus Ambrose have gone through.
That's intriguing what happened to Stephen Johnson. He's down in 13th place. It's incredible.
So here's Jason Bargwana. He's running in third, but he's trying to find a way past Morris, who's a lap car.
Ooh. That won't make Larry too happy.
They were both lap cars, in fact.
Oh,
And Paul
And then
Morris.
everybody sort of does a nose-to-tail job in turn 13 as a result of that.
Have a look at this from another angle. Just turn the back of the Castrol car around.
It doesn't take much of a tap. You can probably, I think there's barely a mark on the back bumper of Larry's car, but it was enough to turn him round. And I know that Larry would be
too happy with that. Anyway, here's the situation at the moment. Stephen Richards leads from Marcus Ambrose, Jason Barguana, Paul Radisich, John Bow, Lowndes, Wheel and Larkham.
Garth Tander and Rodney Forbes are in there too. Jason Bright, Russell Ingall, Stephen Johnson, Glenn Seaton, Jason Richards and Steve Reed, the GMC 400. More after this.